Hey you guys, it's Aces High here, and I'm back today with part two of the Suez Crisis. Now, as I said in part one, if you haven't already seen that, I will put it in the description down below so you can watch part one first. But I'm just, wow, I've already learned so much. I'm really interested in just everything about it, and I mean, I love history. I love the Cold War, so I'm just really excited. Epic History on YouTube. They really do have some good content. I'll put the original video link down in the description as well, so that you guys can check that out. But if you guys like the stuff, give me a like, shoot me a comment with any video suggestions or any questions you have. If you're new to the channel, help me out. Hit that red sub button. It really does help out quite a bit. All right, you guys, let's get started.
In July 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company. Egyptians would take charge of this vital strategic waterway, connecting Europe to Asia, with immediate effect. Britain and France relied on the canal route for their vital supplies of Middle East oil, which fueled their economies. In their eyes, Nasser was a threat, a dictator intent on uniting the Arab world against them.
I mean, I'm still going to learn a lot more about the whole Suez Crisis, but everything I've learned so far, I would argue that, I mean, it's their land. The Egyptians died to dig that canal. It should be theirs. Let's be real. Just because everybody else wants it doesn't mean that that they get it. You don't always get what you want. And you can't just take something from somebody. If it's on your land, you should have the right to do it. Maybe that's just the inner American talking, but yeah, I don't know.
Destroying their influence in the Middle East and North Africa, and using control of the canal as a weapon against them. Secretly, Britain and France agreed to force regime change on Egypt. A joint military intervention to depose Nasser and reassert their standing as global powers.
I'm going to take this second just to point out Epic History. They're on YouTube, and they have some super awesome videos. If you guys haven't checked them out, go ahead and check them out. And as far as my video, if you guys like it, hit that like button. It really does help me out with the whole YouTube algorithm. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that red sub button to stick around and see more content. I do release almost every day. I'd say every day, but it doesn't always happen. Anyway, let's get into it. Part 2. Part 1 is in the description, by the way.
But it was not Britain or France that struck first against Nasser. It was Israel.
Really?
On the 29th of October, Israeli paratroopers landed in the Egyptian Sinai, seizing the strategic Mitla Pass and paving the way for an invasion by ground forces. At the UN, Israel insisted it was acting in self-defense against raids by Palestinian fighters known as Fedayeen, operating from bases in Gaza and Sinai.
Who is determined to wipe out the bases in the Sinai wilderness from which murder and death and destruction are launched again.
But there were no Fedayeen bases in Sinai. Britain and France, claiming to be acting on behalf of the international community, issued an ultimatum to both sides. Stop fighting within 12 hours and withdraw all forces 10 miles from the Suez Canal, or they would intervene to enforce compliance.
I know this game. I do. Come on. I'm sitting here going, why would Israel attack Egypt? Listen, I know that they're feuding, and maybe the little Gaza Strip or something, but to attack a whole section like that and drop paratroopers in so far behind enemy lines, that's not a fight that you're going to win very easily, you know, if at all. It's kind of a stupid fight, and I'm sitting here going, why would they do this? Why would they do this? it all makes sense. America does the same damn thing all the time, where we grab a country that's kind of a third tier country, and we say, or at least second tier, and we say, hey, you guys start the fight, and then we'll use that as an excuse, and we can come in and kind of finish it and do as we want. I would bet $1,000 that Britain and France had something to do with this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just a conspiracy, but I'd bet a lot of money.
Egypt was effectively being told to abandon the Sinai and the canal. Israel accepted the terms. Nasser refused. So on the 31st of October, British and French aircraft, taking off from carriers in the Mediterranean and bases in Cyprus and Malta, began bombing Egyptian airfields, air defences and infrastructure. But not all was as it seemed. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion had been considering an attack on Egypt for many months. He was encouraged by Moshe Dayan, the hawkish commander of Israel's armed forces. Nasser, like all leaders of Arab states, did not view the new Jewish state as legitimate. Now receiving modern weapons from Czechoslovakia, he was seen as a potential threat to Israel's survival. They were also determined to end Egypt's blockade of the Straits of Tiran, which prevented Israeli access to the Red Sea and limited opportunities for trade. France wanted to ally with the Israelis to get rid of Nasser, but British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden was anxious about being seen as the aggressor. So the French came up with an idea. At Sèvres, near Paris, representatives of Britain, France and Israel met in secret to plan a war. Israel would invade Egypt, allowing Britain and France, posing as peacemakers, to issue an ultimatum they knew only Israel would accept. Then, claiming to be acting to safeguard the canal, they would invade Egypt and overthrow Nasser, though they had no real plan for what to do once he was gone.
Listen, I'm not throwing shade at Britain or France. That's a move that countless times America has done, and it's just, I mean, you could see it. There's no way Israel would do a full-on attack behind enemy lines, drop people and all that on Egypt. There's no way. But at least I wouldn't think at that time, But that makes total sense. I'm assuming because they're posting it here, it's not just a conspiracy. It's actually been proven. But I believe it. Let me know what you guys think down below, if this is just kind of a conspiracy or if there really are secret files that have been shown, leaked to the public.
It would take years for the full details of this conspiracy to emerge. On the 5th of November, after a week of bombing, and with Israeli troops winning the battle in Sinai, British and French paratroopers were dropped onto targets around Port Said and Port Fouad at the mouth of the Suez Canal. Once on the ground, they quickly seized Egyptian airfields and key infrastructure. The next morning, under cover of airstrikes and naval bombardment, British and French landings began. Fierce street fighting raged throughout the day, but the Egyptians were massively outgunned, and it proved a one-sided contest.
I'm sure that they're just about to get into the deaths and everything, but before I get into that, they did say that the British and French paratroopers they were dropped in at the ports. Um, I can always look it up, but I figured I'd ask you guys. If any of you guys know, let me know down in the comments. But I know originally paratroopers just had those round parachutes, and they were just kind of dropped in, and they got close to their target. But if the wind gusted the wrong way, they land way off target. And I wonder how accurate it was. Because nowadays you have those two straps. You can kind of pull to go one way or the other, depending on what you want to do with your parachute. It just wasn't the case back in the day. In 1956, when all this happened, did they have controllable parachutes that they were using, or were they still just using the ones where they go where the wind tells them? Let me know. Thanks.
Around 600 Egyptian soldiers and police were killed. British and French deaths totaled just 26. Egyptian civilians suffered most. Up to 1,000 lost their lives, with many more left homeless by air raids and shelling.
Wow.
By the end of the day, the British and French were in control. But they couldn't prevent the Egyptians sabotaging the Suez Canal itself. They sank ships in its narrow channel, blocking the canal and putting it out of action for several months. It wasn't hard to see that the British, French and Israelis were working together. And at the United Nations...
Here it is, based off that quote. It's when the USSR gets involved. It's exactly what what the United States didn't want at the time, is to push Arab countries closer to the Soviets. Because, it was the Cold War, and there was a battle to see who can get the most people on their side.
World opinion quickly turned against them. For once, the US and Soviet Union were united in condemnation.
Really?
A typically animated Soviet premier, Nikita Khrushchev, even threatened to fire rockets at Paris and London. President Eisenhower thought the invasion had no moral or legal justification, and he was furious with his British ally for going behind his back.
The British and French governments delivered a 12-hour ultimatum to Israel and Egypt, now followed up by armed attacks against Egypt. The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. As it is the manifest right of any of these nations to take such decisions and actions, it is likewise our right, if our judgment so dictates, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
That man, let me skip back just so we can look at him again. He let me just start out by saying he's a weird looking dude. He looks fragile. He looks like the wind can blow him over. He's an old guy, and he looks like somebody that got bullied in elementary school and called Four Eyes. But I gotta tell you, he's one of my favorite presidents. Eisenhower, man. On top of... So, of course, in America, we have our interstate system. I brought this up before. But in Europe, you travel a couple hours, and oftentimes you're in a new country or maybe a new giant city. In America, we have Seattle with all the smaller cities around it, like Tacoma and Everett and all that. But once you leave that area, it's nothing for a couple hours. And then you get to Portland, and then it's nothing for a couple more hours until you hit, like, Northern California or halfway through Oregon. Basically, if I have California... Right above that is Oregon. Right above that is Washington. That is just the west coast of the United States. If I want to travel from Seattle, Washington, all the way down to LA or San Diego or hell, even San Francisco. San Francisco is in Northern California, and it's still going to take me 14 hours, and that's on an interstate. Imagine beforehand when instead of going straight down I-5, instead I had to kind of go like a swirly pattern. and I had to follow this highway that at times the roads might be bad, or if they are good, the speed might drop down to only 35 or 40 miles per hour. You have all these stoplights because it goes through multiple towns. It would take forever to get anywhere. Nobody traveled. He linked our entire country. It's just, he's an incredible president. That's a story for another time. But on top of all that, the way that he dealt with issues is he sat back, and I honestly think that he just thought about it deeply and thought the pros and the cons against each other, and what will happen if we do this, what will happen if we do that. Okay, we should do plan A, not plan B. It's just not too many people act like that anymore, and I think he's an underrated president, but he might be, if not my favorite, he's one of my favorites.
Or a proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Eisenhower wanted international attention focused on Hungary, where Soviet troops were, at that moment, brutally crushing a popular uprising. Instead, Britain and France's reckless intervention was likely to push Arab states closer to the Soviet Union. In the UN Security Council, Britain and France used their veto to block resolutions that criticized Israel's attack on Egypt, or their own intervention. But with both world superpowers condemning their attack, they now faced a vote in the General Assembly and the threat of UN sanctions. Britain's economy had been fragile before the crisis began. Now, market fears caused the British currency to crash, threatening economic disaster. Only a massive loan from the International Monetary Fund could save Britain, but Eisenhower blocked any IMF aid until Britain agreed to a UN-backed ceasefire in Egypt.
I love that man.
Eden, facing growing opposition abroad, at home, and from within his own government, had few options. Just 2 days after British troops landed in Egypt, they announced a ceasefire. The French, abandoned by their ally, had no choice but to follow suit. Within days, the UN's first major peacekeeping operation got underway, as Danish UN troops arrived in Egypt to take over from the British and French. As they packed up and re-embarked on their landing ships to return home, it was officially job well done. But in truth, Suez had been a humiliating fiasco. The political leadership had been reckless, the military objectives confused, and as soon as international pressure had mounted up, the British had had no option but to abort the entire mission. That winter, under intense American pressure, Israeli forces also withdrew from Sinai.
So I've heard a lot of the time, I've heard plenty of times actually, where whether you like it or not at this point in history, America is kind of not a peacekeeper. We create a lot of wars, but we're kind of the ones that regulate everything in a way, or a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, China's quickly growing, and I think that they will be there very soon if they're not already. And back in the day, it was the USSR along with us, kind of controlling everything. It's just interesting that at this point we have such an influence that we get Israel to back all the way back up just to keep the peace. It's, yeah.
The Suez Crisis forced Britain and France to accept that they were now second-rank powers. No longer could they act.
This is actually something that I'm glad that they showed. If you look here, I mean, we have all the UN people and all that. A lot of pictures, I've always noticed Egypt right next to the United States. I'm just wondering why. You know? Why is Egypt right next to the U.S.? I would think that one side of the U.S. would be Great Britain, and the other side would be, I don't know, Canada, you know? But it's just interesting. On top of the Suez Crisis, it really did show that Great Britain and France are no longer the powers they used to be. They are kind of a second class power. They're still incredibly strong, don't get me wrong, but they are not the superpowers, not at this point. It was the USSR and the United States. Um, and I mean, that type of stuff changes all the time. But something that, and they might point out in a second, but something that they haven't pointed out yet is I feel that it also showed that Egypt is a second class power. You know? They, or maybe not as high as Great Britain, but they've really proved themselves. They've set themselves apart from a lot of other countries in the world, and shown that they are a power to mess with. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, but I think I hit the nail on the head, as they might say. You know.
Act as they wished on the world stage, without first considering the view of the to foreign intervention mean his memory is still revered by Arabs across the Middle
Wow, do the math on that. He died at age 52 in 1970. This all went down in 1956, so take off 16 years. You're left with a 38-year-old. A 38-year-old doing, wow, he was incredibly mature, I would say. He's not even 40. Maybe that just says something about America, where all of our presidents lately have just been in their 70s. Um, Maybe we need somebody young again. I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong, Nasser wasn't perfect, but I do back him in wanting to, specifically in wanting to control the canal. I mean, it was on his land. I understand that. Yeah, wow.
East. The impact of the Suez Crisis on America was perhaps the most far-reaching. The collapse of British and French prestige amongst Arab nations meant the US would now take the lead in countering Soviet expansion in the Middle East and securing the West's oil supplies. The Suez Crisis would accelerate US involvement in this volatile region. The consequences would stretch well into the 21st century.
Clarifying debate over a possible war in Iraq has given an added sense of urgency to their mission.
Join the ranks.
All right, you guys, let's have a chat about that. So, what'd you guys think? I mean, that was part two of two. Like I said, it was going to be a long one, split into two parts. But I definitely learned a few things. I think I understand that Egypt wanted control of the canal, considering that it was on their land, and it's, as far as I see it, it's kind of their property. It's not like it's international waters necessarily. It's not out in the middle of the ocean. Um, at the end of the day, you could say this was about religion. You could say it was about rights of a country. You could say a lot of things. But let's be real. If it wasn't for the oil over from the Middle East that the Great Britain and France were trying to get shipped in for their country, it never would have come to this. It probably would have been that Egypt has control of the Suez Canal, and they just charge. Easy as that. Yeah, I don't know. You know, oil's a hell of a thing. I'm hoping the next 100 years or so, it won't be as, maybe even 50 years, it won't be as, everywhere, I guess. It won't be in everything anymore. I mean, think about it. When did, Rockefeller discovered gasoline, right? Or I guess he didn't discover it, he made it readily available in the U.S. That was what, 130 years ago, something like that. It's about time that we move on to something else. It's about time that we evolve. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and as always, hit that like button, smash it real good if you like the content. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys want me to do next. Till next time, I love y'all. This is Aces High, and I'm out.